Yeah.
You see me as somebody successful.
Yeah.
So now I can go back and tell you how hard it was.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is while it's hard, nobody cares.
I have to tell you, I mean, it certainly boosts my ego when I beat you at pickleball. I don't know how you walk away. I walk away energized, ready to tackle the day.
I made you work. That's how I felt. If you're at the top of your game and you're competing for championships, he said there's two types of coaches' wives. There's great ones and ex ones.
Yes.
This is the Grow Business Podcast with Cory Mosley.
Thank you for letting me get out.
Icy knees.
And icy knees, that's right. Thank you for letting me.
I should have brought you some Tiger Balm. Do they still make Ben Gay? Is that they still?
I do. We used to icy hot. We used to use
Shaquille O'Neal said.
That's right.
You gotta say it like him though. I want some icy hot. My knees hurt.
That's exactly right.
Yeah,
we used to use icy hot.
You got worked out.
I did.
That was good.
I showed well for the first time with a paddle in my hand.
You did.
I was competitive enough.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
made you work.
Yeah, we'll leave it there. Well, everybody, yes, you have come to the right. Are you all right? Get it out now. We can't have you coughing into the mic.
All choked up.
We just start the show.
I'm good.
So you're thinking about the knees. Well, folks, you come to the right place. Yes, you are at the Grow Business Podcast. I'm your host, Cory Mosley, joined by co-captain of this ship. Are we on a ship or a plane? I don't want to be on a ship.
Not today.
Apparently.
Correct.
With all the things
Not in the
that have
Mediterranean,
been recently
right.
going on. I don't want to play that. See, people wonder why I'm gitchy about cruises. This is why.
Right.
I have never caught bubonic plague on a Delta flight anywhere.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct.
I've never got bubonic plague at the Ritz-Carlton or the Four Seasons or the Marriott for that reason.
The
okay?
hand of virus
yes.
right. But
on these ships, I'm just going to leave it there.
It's real.
I'm just LG 007 Lon Graham is here.
Voice of reason.
it's good to be here, Cory.
Yes,
and
yes.
not on a ship.
Yes, and the man behind the boards, he's here with us to make sure this whole thing goes how it's supposed to go. Willie H is here.
Hit the buttons, William.
All right, so I'm just going to dive right into.
Okay.
I wanted to take a different tack. We've been. We've had a good run. I mean, I think all of our episodes are great, and I think they're all valuable. But I wanted to take a different tact.
Okay.
This week.
Sure.
As we talk to business owners and as we have that conversation, I think often, and I was having this conversation with somebody the other day. The lonely at the top kind of thing.
Oh, sure.
And we think about lonely at the top, assumes you're at the top, right? That you're at the top of your game or whatever. Right. But I want to have a different little spin on that because what we were kind of really talking about, the context is if the buck stops with you, as they say, you're left, you take all of the weight.
Yeah, it's heavy.
And I think, people glamorize the success of things or glamorize some of the outcomes.
Right.
And we brush over, the story behind it.
Right.
So, folks, if you're just joining us, we take an approach. We look at everything through the lens of the 5 pillars of business growth. And, these are the 5 pillars that we've structured and we created. And then I feature in my latest book, Position for Growth. But it's really based around you give them the 5 pillars.
Well, thank you, Cory.
Yeah.
It's mindset, sales, marketing, operations, and people.
All right. Well, I just like to keep you fresh. I like to keep you fresh.
Keep me fresh, exactly.
Make sure you know the content.
Right. So remind me of what we're talking about.
Yeah, let you say it out loud. And the reality is when we talk about those 5 pillars, it's simply the thesis that every business growth challenge can be overcome. And they all fall in one of those categories. So if you are able to identify, isolate, and attack those issues, you can continue growing your business. So if we think about pillar number 1, being mindset, this really becomes the idea for today. So today we're talking about the loneliness of being the boss.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, that's real.
You know, particularly when you're carrying the weight. And, you know, this is something that most entrepreneurs don't talk about, you know, publicly.
Right.
But nearly every successful, at least, and I got to imagine it's swinging. I mean, if you're struggling, it's the same thing. But I believe every business owner at some point feels this privately, whether or not they talk about it publicly.
So yes, business owners, because that's the majority of our group, of the listeners, and also leaders, though, business leaders, organizational leaders at different levels. And I say that, you know, running regions of people and multi-millions of dollars, and understanding that as the person that people look to for guidance and answers, that also bears the burden. Same thing, same concept, right? It's just, it's like, what's your role? If you're the one that's making decisions, you're the ones where answers coming from, and you're the one that has to answer for the results.
That's right.
Which is really what we're talking about.
Right.
It's heavy, and it can be for sure.
Yeah, and you know, I think it's also a miscommunication. I think a lot of ways. I heard Gary Vee articulating this as somebody where the guy was like, you know, oh, I can't, you know, why can't my people? I want them to think about this like it's theirs, and those other things. And he's like, it's not.
It's perfect, right?
It's not. Your people aren't going to work the same way that you would work. Like it's a silly sentiment,
right?
You know, but all of that in that big ball of wax that drives, you know, the constant pressure,
correct?
You know, the isolation,
right.
You know, there's even, you know, a sleeplessness to this too, you know, and no one really understands that. Now, you signed up,
right?
Right? You know,
correct.
I mean, I know the internet told you it was going to be easy.
Right.
You know, all you need is a laptop and a Stripe account. Willie H., why are we not in Bali?
Right.
I thought that's what the ad said. The guy had his feet up in Bali telling me how easy it was.
Correct.
But you did not persuade me, Nicholas.
Yes.
Right.
So I think, you know, and then many times, though, LG also, you know, the bigger the business gets, you know, people think, oh, you're making it, or that's creating more freedom per se,
right?
But it's really not in a lot of ways. So if you know, are somebody that's been feeling mentally exhausted, emotionally isolated,
right.
You know, or like you're just carrying the weight nobody understands, I think this episode will be for you.
Yeah, I like it.
So, you know, employees see revenue. Mm-hmm. They don't see pressure.
Right.
Right. So friends, and I talked about this in my book previous to this, which was specifically for Entrepreneurship Confidential.
Right.
Was written for first-time entrepreneurs. And I talk about, you know, friends and family, they don't understand.
No.
They don't understand what's going on. No. You know, my grandmother worked for the same company for 42 years.
God bless her.
The idea of quitting a high-paying job, you know, they thought I was nuts when, you know, I left the retail car business.
Right.
You know, making six figures at that point in my early 20s.
Yeah.
And they're like, you're going to go do what?
Lord have mercy.
Yeah, exactly. That was, yes. So your friends don't understand, you know, again, your family may benefit from the business, but don't necessarily understand the burden.
Right.
You know, so I think, and there's just always this thing to appear strong, right?
Right.
Les Brown said, you don't ask for help because you're weak, you ask for help so you can remain strong.
Correct.
And I think when people I think I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, and I said that they said, oh, I don't like to ask people for help. And I said, well, you would not, if you really needed help, you definitely would not ask.
Right.
And they just smiled because they knew I was right. Like they're doing fine. But like I said, you won't ask for help when you don't need it, or just the idea of letting someone help you. You would never, you'd be the last person. You just let the whole house go on fire before you ask for help. And I think sometimes you just got to get over that.
Here's what I'll say. Don't wait till you get broken down to ask for help.
Right.
because if you don't ask for help, you will get broken down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll get beaten down and broken down and maybe even end up broke.
Right. Well, and we talked about this eon. I mean, we're in the hundreds now.
Right.
We're in the hundreds now. We're in the hundreds now.
Right.
But we talked about this a long time ago. I just took on this approach that whatever's going on, I won't die.
Yeah, you've said that before.
And it's so simple. Like it was such a crystallized. I mean, it's crazy in its simplicity. It's like whatever is going on, I won't die.
Right.
So how bad it is, I won't die. Whatever the burden, the temporary situation.
Right.
That's what is so interesting and troubling. When we think about like depression, when we think about suicide, things of that nature is the permanency.
Right.
To a temporary situation.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I think if we both sat here, we can think about circumstances, right? that were challenging, that at the time,
right, we
didn't see how maybe we were going to get out of it or how we were going to navigate it or whatever. And now you fast forward time, and can you imagine had you done something extreme?
Correct.
Right? So, so it's just an interesting thing. Because even again at the top, even business owners who are making millions and millions of dollars, there's still a emotional exhaustion or an aloneness factor to it. And I think that's what we say. Well, why? Well, I think back to when Bed Bath & Beyond was going bankrupt, and I read that the CFO jumped off a building.
Okay.
Now, I don't know the circumstances.
Right.
I don't know if there was some I don't know if there was some embezzlement or if there was something there that we thought was criminal.
Right.
But man, can you imagine the weight, the magnitude of that?
Whatever it was, the weight that he was carrying, which is what we're talking about.
Right.
The weight that he was carrying was more than he was able to handle on his own.
Right.
So the choice he made was to stop carrying it.
Yeah.
And that's how he chose to do it.
Yeah.
And so I don't pretend to know I don't pretend to know what he was dealing with, but we both know in multiple different levels that the more successful you get, the more responsibility you carry, and the more responsibility you carry, the heavier it gets.
Right. And I mean, and here's the thing: employees clock out.
Right.
Owners carry the business home.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So,
owners and leaders,
Willie H has a laptop that he keeps with him so that he can take care at home.
Right.
But I can't have the expectation that that after he leaves here, that he's consumed. He certainly is not consumed with the same things I am.
Correct.
Right? So it's just not a, and we have a mutual friend at 501. And Willie H knows who I'm talking about. At 501, our guy ain't been thinking about nothing that's got to do with the job. Don't email me. Don't call me. D&D. I'll see you in the morning.
That's right.
Over again, that's right. So, and again, I mean, what is that? Oh, what does that mean? Is that bad? Is that good? Is that whatever? Right. So, I think it's worth thinking about because, what does that look like? Well, we're thinking about payroll. We're thinking about, fear of failure. We're thinking about, making hard decisions, lawsuits.
Right.
Thing about lawsuits is you can sue anybody for anything.
Correct.
Right? It doesn't mean you'll win, doesn't mean it will sustain, but you can start an action.
Correct.
And then now you're forced to go through that action and all the things that go along with that. Many people would argue we're dealing with a lot of economic uncertainty right now. I don't know what that ticker looked like the last time you went to the gas station. So I know what you drive. So I know that A93, you might have dipped down to 91 minimum.
Right.
You might have gone to 91. But I know what that, what that's looking like.
Still high.
That's measurably different. It's like, even for somebody who didn't pay attention to that, I'm not making decisions on whether I'm going to go somewhere based on gas.
Correct.
So I'm not going to go that far.
Right.
But when I'm pumping and that thing stopped, I'm looking.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
Yeah, because that first number has changed dramatically.
Right? Yeah. Yes. Like, wow.
Correct.
So, whatever your politics, the math is not up for discussion, right? Math,
Correct.
dollars and cents is not a controversial, right? 4 + 4 is always 8.
Right. Well, some of our business owners, directly in line with that, some of the business owners that listen to us have fleets.
Right.
They have service fleets. And those, you're talking about the price of gas going up, the price of your business goes up. You've got to make some decisions about how are you going to handle it.
Right. I'm doing an event, and I'm doing a speaking event, and I do, for my speaking fees, I do flat rate travel. So I'm not getting in the receipts and having to turn in stuff and then debate on what hotel I should stay in or how I should fly. Right. I do not fly in 43B. That must be an emergency situation. Right. I'm not flying next to the toilet. But so I don't even want to have that debate. So I go calculate, look at where I'm going and do that. And it was a client that was having me back again at their event. And, I was like, let me take a look. I'll try to stay as close to where we were as last year. And I went looking and I'm like, man, the flight. Yeah. I'm like, it is what it is, dude. Right. But, and what is that? Well, that's all, jet fuel and now all these other little nuances there to go along with it. So you've got the economic uncertainty. You've got, marital strain, like you have those different types of things. I have to tell you, that's a whole nother episode, but like unsupportive spouses on the other side of the things, you don't know. I can't tell you how many entrepreneurs or people I've worked with or coached over the years that really battle that piece of the puzzle. And, they're out here trying to build something and they just don't have a support infrastructure.
That should be against the law.
Yeah. And they just don't have a support infrastructure to do what they need to do, or I can honestly say I've never had that. I've never been told. My wife's never told me I work too much. Right. And you know what I mean? So like
you are blessed in that.
It's a difference.
Yeah. I listen to sports talk because I spend a lot of time in the car. Yeah. I listen to sports talk radio, and there's a coach that is one of the talks that I listen to, and he talks about coaches at the professional level and now at the collegiate level, and it's, all sports. If you're at the top of your game and you're competing for championships, he said there's 2 types of coaches' wives. There's great ones and ex ones.
Yes. Yeah, I like that.
Yes. And that's exactly what you're talking about, Cory. Same thing with entrepreneurs, same thing with business owners, same thing with leaders. There's great ones and X ones, and either they understand and support you or they don't.
Right. I think, I think that's interesting, because that just is an area where you need, and I say it's the same thing about spouses who work together. Mm-hmm. I tell people, because when people see, my wife and I are together all day, all morning, all day, all evening, and I tell people very simply, whether it works, there's no middle ground to me. It's whether a disaster and train wreck, or it works exceptionally well. Right. There's just not really, it's not something that has room for, we kind of, it's middle of the road. It whether works or it doesn't, kind of to your point. Yeah. In that world.
And you clearly define conflict resolution at all levels.
Right.
Like you have to have a plan, because the more time you spend with anybody, you're going to have conflict. And you have to develop a plan to resolve that. And that's not necessarily the road that we wanted to go down here, but it's a piece of heavy is the head that wears the crown, right? It's a piece of that.
I'm not a consensus.
No, not consensus. No.
I'm just right. When you're saying
it can be
there's still a decision making hierarchy. You can work with whatever, but there's still Well,
it's like how do you what did Dr. Willie Jolly say in E&D say in their book? You attack the problem, not the person.
Right. Yes.
And that's what I mean. You've got to have a plan that you both agree on how you're going to do it, not necessarily what the outcome's going to be.
Right.
Voice of reason.
All right. So, let's talk a little bit more about kind of what we're saying here too. Yeah. Why? Let's talk about why this issue doesn't get dealt with. Sure. As much. And I think, let's see if you agree with some of these here. One, this fear of appearing weak.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
There's so much emphasis on it, particularly when you're talking about, men, business owners.
Correct.
And the both sides. I mean, actually, honestly, both sides too, because people who are less enlightened, right? Fall into this theory of business women being more emotional and all these other things. So in fact, you do find, I think, many of the business leaders that I know that are women or are in position, are directors inside organizations or whatever, have an extra bite to them in a certain way, right? Because they don't want to feed into any stereotype.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up with it. So my mother, rest in peace. My mother had 2 master's degrees in psychology and human behavior, was a dissertation away from her doctorate, taught class at the college level, taught psychology at the college level, worked on a military base in a military environment, worked in a predominantly male role, and she was in a leadership role with men on a military base. She went out of her way to demonstrate strength and capability so that she could overcome the perceptions that she dealt with. And I think that's what you're talking about, whether it's business owners as women or business leaders. The strong ones want to appear even stronger so that they don't look weak and they don't look like they can be taken advantage of. Right.
No, 100%. So you have that on really both sides of the fence too. And because it's inherent also on the, I think, the male side too of, think about, again, not talking politics, but there's a large emphasis in our leadership to not appear weak.
Correct.
And to appear strong and strong to our enemies and strong to our adversaries and all of these things. So that's one. There's also the social media illusion.
Right.
Correct. And we hear about this all the time, and we hear about, so-and-so was a big influencer and again, a whole nother episode just about leading and following, but creating this concept, for people out there that want to mirror somebody else's life because it looks so great. But then you fast forward, or then, time goes on, and you probably, there's definitely people I've seen, and I'm like, okay, looks interesting. And then a year later, it was, all a scam. It was a Ponzi scheme. It was, all of these other things to keep going. I was just reading about a big money manager, Beverly Hills money manager, who I think they got Nick Cannon for like $2 million. You read that? Yeah, a slow siphoning of money.
Wow,
Guys just going to the ATM, taking out money, and over time, I think it was like $1.5 million that they scammed, that they stole basically, that he stole from them. I stole from him, and who else knows whoever, but it just came out that it was him in particular.
Right.
So I think there's this illusion that everyone is doing so well, online,
Right.
And it affects everybody. It's stunning to me. And I talked to a friend yesterday, and he was, not yesterday, but recently, that was just telling me something. He's like, at that time we were reminiscing on some things. He's like, man, I didn't even want to be here.
Right.
And, he's like, I was getting off, conversations with clients and like not even believing something I was talking about.
Right.
So again, but if you looked at the outward, so there's this illusion piece of it, and there's the leader mask.
Right.
I think that starts to boil in your area in terms of talking to sales leaders and those.
I've worn it, so I know. Yeah.
So entrepreneurial ego.
Right.
And I think there's a lot of things we chalk up to maturity, but I don't know if maturity is the word. Like, I don't know that just age and wisdom. I think you can change your perspective at any age.
Correct. Yeah.
And just experience and observational kind of surroundings.
Correct.
And say, you know what, I want to understand what fits me better.
Yeah.
And I have friends who are very flashy, but they're authentic. Like, that's them.
Okay.
It's not like, oh, is the camera on? Okay, great. Let me put on my thing. Like, that's just who they are.
Right.
And I think that's different than playing to the audience or playing to the. I recently watched have you watched the Hulk Hogan documentary?
No, I've heard about it. I haven't watched it.
Yeah, I just recently watched the Hulk Hogan documentary, and one of those things in self-reflection. Obviously, he didn't know he was going to die when he was doing it, because they were supposed to be a follow-up. Like, they were going to follow up with him 3 months later, and unfortunately, he didn't make it. But a lot of it became, his real name's Terry Bollea.
Yes.
A lot of it became living life as Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And really buying into that whole thing and blurring the line between Terry Bollea and Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And getting consumed by that. Also from an ego standpoint.
Correct.
And buying into that hype, drinking your own juice, as they say.
Right.
Drinking your own Kool-Aid, as they say.
Well, I mean, Ric Flair's last name is not Flair. It is his personality.
Right.
So,
right, sure.
And
that's a great industry where, like, you're this character.
100%.
And then people connect. I mean, people even do it in TV. I mean, like, you watch a show long enough. I mean,
correct.
Spoiler alert, Mariska Hargitay is not really a police detective.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Like, Benson she's not really, but 25 years.
Correct.
In this character, in this role.
Well, and that's such
Ice-T was a pimp.
Ice-T.
Just FYI, okay? He was in real life.
Right. Yes.
I was at the Hudson Hotel in New York, probably, I don't know, 03-ish, or 2000, whatever. Hudson Hotel. Ian Schrager at the time owned the hotel. It was red hot back then. Ian Schrager was Paul Rubin's partner, Studio 51. Those are the Studio 51 guys.
Yeah.
And Ian Schrager broke off and started his hotels. And I was in their nightclub, and Ice-T came in. He still had the ponytail and the whole thing. Sure. He came in with something on his left and something on his right, and he was
he was doing business.
It was interesting. So now I'm not saying he was pimping back then,
right?
But like, he's legitimately. So I'm just making the point that people can be. I mean, they can change. They can do this. They can do this whole thing.
Well, and you make a good point. And this is, I think, what you're talking about, Cory, is familiarity breeds comfort. And so we think we know people because of what we see. And if we see it more and more and more, we think that's who they are.
That's right.
And, you talk about wrestling certainly is the entertainment industry. And they are, they're entertainers. They're incredible athletes. Don't kid yourself.
Sure.
They are entertainers first.
Right.
That's why you see so much of this with actors that do, like, movie actors. Mm-hmm. Like, their relationships change based on who they were in character with in a movie. Right. So you'll see somebody marry somebody that they were in character with because they got so familiar with that character, and then they get divorced when they go to the next movie because it's this it's this familiarity and how do we embrace it? So all of the things that you're saying, I'll bring it back to the points that we're making here is that there's a lot that goes on below the surface that we don't see. We live in a highlight world. I mean, ESPN got built on highlights. Sure. They don't see all the work that the guy put in the dark in the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning to be a good basketball player. That's right. So that he can make the shot with the clock running out to win the game.
And that goes back to the social media, because social media has created, like, the dangerous illusion that on the business side, successful business owners are always confident, always energized, always winning. Right. Like, again, it doesn't show.
Well, and that's what we show. Right. Because we don't show behind the scenes because we got to be strong.
Right.
I mean, it's like it's this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Correct. this came out so well. I'm like, dude, you have no idea.
Like 17th time.
I was in my drawers at 3 a.m. trying to get this done, and trying to get. You got no idea. It's just like, all right, house coat. I mean, we don't. I was in my house coat.
I promise you, it was fun. That's good.
So again, it really is mind blowing once you get people's backstories. But that you have the entrepreneurs that are like drowning emotionally, but they're posting motivational quotes on Instagram.
Right.
Sometimes they're trying to motivate themselves or whatever. And it's just always something you find out in the end. It's always like the stories that come out now, like when entertainers tell stories, or like all these podcasts now where they have this, tell us about, what happened in '86,
right,
or how this song came together, or how this happened, or how that happened. You're like, wow, it just how somebody came up with something. It's like, I was just, when I was sitting there and I just started tapping and and then all of a sudden it was like, we are the champions, like how they did it. So I think it's in the backstory, or when people reach a point where they're comfortable. There's probably some stories I'll tell later on. Oh yeah, as well.
Well,
so
when here's part of the thought process on that, Cory, is the more success we have, the more inclined we are to reveal how hard it was to get there.
Sure.
So we'll go back and tell the story.
Safety zone now.
You see me as somebody successful, so now I can go back and tell you how hard it was.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is while it's hard, nobody cares.
That's right.
I mean,
no, that's true.
Nobody cares.
That's true. I mean, I think back. I was having this conversation with a tech CEO that we're advising right now in this AI company, and he's raising money, and we're talking about we're just talking about raising money and the difficulty of that, and the elements of that, and being scrappy and those different things, and I was sharing with him. I'm like, listen, our first major contract that we won. I couldn't finance that. I couldn't fund it. Like it had to be like, I don't know anything crazier or more uncomfortable than having something tangible, like knowing you have this deal. You've got this $1 million contract. This is $1 million contract. And you're like, but I got to get over the hump. I got to get it going. Right. So it's like, okay, great. I've got this great runway. And, in the corporate world, you want, what we're all after in the contract, we want that PO. That PO is like cash.
Correct.
Right. That corporation is set aside, like those dollars are there. That's your purchase order. So it's like, great. You've got this $1 million purchase order, but I gotta hire a staff of 9. I got to do all these things to get going, to then bill, like, again, the plight of so I got to run it for 30 days. I got to pay everybody for 30 days to then bill and wait 30 days to get paid. So to start this machine.
Correct.
And if it wasn't for a client of mine who I went to and said, I got this contract, here's my problem. Would you fund this? And he had not done that. I don't know what I would have done. To get it done. And didn't, he didn't take some opportunity to take advantage of the situation or whatever. Like he didn't even, it wasn't like a VIG, I didn't have to get a hard money loan, like that kind of thing. But it's uncomfortable. But what was the other version of that? No, I can't take the contract. I can't take the contract because I don't have a way to fund it. So now that's a story I'm happy to tell.
Once it's time.
17 years later.
Right.
So, that was our little secret. But now I'm free to talk. Obviously free to talk about it. So So let's talk about something. So we kind of set the tone. I mean, many people, this is probably resonating. I mean, if you're running a business, this is resonating with you in some capacity. So let's, as usual, we want to talk about some of the problems, but we want to give you the flip side of it too. So I want to kind of pivot to some healthy ways.
Yeah, please.
If you're dealing with some loneliness, you're dealing with some of these factors, there's some healthy ways to do that, like from a practical standpoint. So I think number one, it's a great time to look at what your peer network is. And to build a real peer network. I spent over a decade and a half in the auto industry. I mean, I'm still in the auto industry. I still have elements in the auto industry. So, you're talking about over 20 years. we always just say no one understands the car. Anyone who hasn't been in the car business doesn't really understand the car business.
Right.
So when you're around people you can talk the car business with,
Right.
it becomes so different.
Oh, right.
And because they just don't understand. And it's the same thing in the business community.
Correct.
If I was in a room with 10 folks and all those guys, worked for, had some roles in the business, they're not going to understand my plight the same way. So
Correct.
What other entrepreneurs are you working with? Who are you masterminding with?
Right.
Who are your trusted advisors, in the process?
Right.
And just looking, maybe evaluating or forming, right? You may have a place, well, Cory, I haven't really paid any attention to that. Okay, now you can form, or you need to reevaluate who's in that network, who are you masterminding? I've made attempts with various people over the years to meet frequently. We've done in the speaking community. We've done some get-togethers, and many times they just don't stick. But that doesn't mean you stop trying.
Correct.
Because again, you're not going to be connected, particularly if you're genuine about it.
Right.
There are people who come to take and not come to give. So that's worth a conversation too.
Yeah, the people that you associate with are so important. And, you talk about the car business. I've worked in surgical sales for 15 years. And to have to start out a story by I was in the back of the operating room and the surgeon turned to me and said, what do I do next? Not a lot of people are going to understand that unless they've been in the operating room in that situation.
Right.
So, and that's the same thing for business owners, whether it's based on the size of your revenue, whether it's based on the size of your employee group, how many employees you have. Find people that you, one, have a healthy respect for, and two, that you can talk to as people, as business owners.
Right.
And so what you said, Cory, is two things. You said, one, if you don't have it, find them. And start with one.
Yep.
Start looking your community or in your industry. It doesn't have to be somebody that's in your city. They can be on the other side of the country. Technology allows for that. Find at least one person that you can reach out to and say, hey, look, this is what I'm doing. I'm looking to build relationships so that we can have some community. That's so important because you got to be able to talk to somebody who gets you.
That's right.
And if you already have a group, look at either your contribution to that group, or you making a positive contribution to that group, or have you outgrown that group?
Right.
And if you've outgrown that group, that means you're feeling heavy again. Maybe you need to look for either another group or start with another new person.
This might be a guy I want to work with.
That's right. Longram.com.
Yep. Appreciate it, Cory.
That's where you get there.
That's right.
All right. So number 2 is to stop carrying everything alone.
Yeah.
Now, that can work in a couple different ways. Number 1, from a team environment, that can be reevaluating your approach to delegation. Getting yourself some leadership support. And this other one here, tied together, the one that's not as controversial, which is coaching. Getting yourself some coaching.
Correct.
I'll never forget a video. Eric Schmidt, former chairman of Google, said what was one of the most valuable things that he had done in his career. He said it was to get a coach. Now, I don't know who coaches the chairman of Google.
Right.
I mean, that was one of the Tony Robbins $1 million a year clients or something.
Right.
But the funny thing is, it doesn't matter. You can't see the picture in the frame. So honestly, if you're aligned with the right coach, it's very valuable. They don't have to have been. It doesn't have to be someone above you.
Right.
In terms of their ability to vertically work with you and have an impact. And then the other part of that is the one that's more controversial, and that's the therapeutic method.
Right.
That's the idea of therapy and having a therapist and breaking the stigma that a lot of times is associated with that.
Right.
It goes for the stay strong, not weak thing. Like, people think of therapy as something that you do because you're trying to overcome trauma, you're trying to work out stuff, but there's just a therapeutic aspect to it, that just to have, potentially someone that you can say anything to, or talk about openly without the judgment that you might not have with a business associate or a spouse or a friend or that type of thing. So what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, so I like both of them, and then I'll add one other thing too. But the coaching for sure, And I think the value of coaching is it's a perspective. And I talk a lot about, when I talk to sales leaders, I talk a lot about perspective.
Right.
And there's the more perspective you can have, the better positioned you are to draw out the best in the people on your team. And so what a coach can do for you is give you perspective without the weight, without the emotion. They can listen to what you're dealing with,
Right.
and process it differently than you can, because they don't feel the weight of it that you do. They're not trying to make your payroll.
That's right.
So they can listen to you. Same thing with mental health. Mental health is a mental health coach.
Right.
Somebody, therapy, mental health, whatever you want to call it. It's not going to work for everybody, because not everybody's going to be willing to work in it.
Sure.
And you can believe in it and not have the right mental health professional too.
Right.
So there's some things that go into that. But if you find the right person to help you navigate through that, it's going to make your life better.
Yeah.
The other thing that I talk about, I do for myself, we've talked about this before. My therapy is walking, and I leave my technology at the house. The only thing I take with me is a bottle of water. And I'll go walking through the neighborhood. I'll see things that I wouldn't see if I was listening to a podcast. I listen to podcasts in my car. I read books at home. I do all that stuff. But I go for a walk. It liberates my mind so I can think about things differently.
Right.
I can look at different perspectives. I can process information differently. And I do all that. And I'm sure people that are driving by me when I'm walking are looking at my hands and my mouth like, that guy's crazy. And they're probably right on some level.
Yeah.
But you've got to find something outside of you to help you deal with it is ultimately what we're talking about.
Well, and you're leading into 3, which is the creating emotional outlets outside of the business.
Yes.
So hobbies.
Correct.
Fitness.
Yep.
Faith. Travel.
Yeah.
Brotherhood, community, all of those things there. So
100%.
So look at where that is, pickleball.
Pickleball.
See, there
That's
you go.
right.
Right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I have to tell you, I mean, it certainly boosts my ego when I beat you at pickleball. I don't know how you walk away. I walk away energized, ready to tackle the day.
I made you work. That's how I felt. Like for the first time,
You did.
I
You're
made
a good
you work.
server. You're a good server. Yeah, you did. Yeah, you didn't roll over. So you should have been put away a few times.
Correct.
But you rallied back. Yeah, that's good. Well, I was a little rusty too. So
Yeah, it was fun. It was good.
Yeah,
it was an outlet
yes,
for us.
correct. All right, and then another one here is learn to separate your identity from the business. And I think that's interesting because you are not only your company. And I think it's important, for people to think about their self-worth beyond the revenue. And this is an interesting one, particularly if you're in a challenging time.
Right.
I mean, everything's great. You're riding high. Great, I'm King Kong. When you're in a challenging time, you start to go, am I as good as I thought I was? Am I, is my business you try to start rationalizing certain things, but it's such a tie-in. I mean, it's kind of like what I think is so fascinating is how if a small business owner fails, like we look at that as such a tragic moment. But when Spirit Airline, like, do you understand what I'm saying?
Right.
Like at the small business bootstrapping level, it appears so traumatic, and not that it is. I mean, it hurts. You set out with ambitions and it didn't work. But then you open the news, and it's some Silicon Valley company. You burn through all their investment money, out of business. And then that guy, can I tell you how many people I know in that CEO suite or are out there that go burn through $20 million and crash this company, and then 6 months later they've raised another $20 million to do something else and try it again. And no one looks at that. It really is just a perspective difference, because no one looks at that.
Right.
If the bakery fails, it's some great, like, oh, you could, and that person is going to internalize it. It's so difficult. But these guys out here that, particularly when they're burning through other people's money, or these companies that go bankrupt, that mismanage, the big ones. I'm Why do you have to wreck this company? Because it's wreckable.
Yeah.
But like, it is a different perspective. They're not thinking about it like that. It's, hey, I gave it a run. I try, my intent was good. You weren't a scammer like, that woman that's in jail, the Theranos woman that was making up tests that didn't exist. And I'm not talking about the scammers. I'm talking about people that went out there. There are things we genuinely tried to do that didn't work the way we had planned for them to work.
Right.
So it wasn't ill intent, it was positive intent and a plan, and everybody's smart and you're working with smart people. And sometimes it doesn't work the way you want. Sometimes time is not on your side. Sometimes, and then there's times when somebody catches lightning in a bottle.
Right.
I work with a lab that thought they were going to do $3 million a year, and that was the plan. And COVID came, and they started doing lab tests and COVID tests, and they were doing $3 million a month.
Right.
You couldn't have predicted that.
Correct.
They were right place, right time. I mean, people underestimate luck. Yes, preparation and all these, there's all these great sayings, but sometimes the right place, the right time, and the right circumstance, based on whatever you believe, the universe, you watch The Secret 100 times, whatever, you manifest it, whatever it is. There are just some things, there's right time, right place, and those kinds of things. That need to be factored, I'm
going to bring it back to where we started with this point, Cory, and it is identifying, separating yourself from the business and your identity. And I've certainly done that before and worked through that. The way to do that is some of the things we've already talked about. Work with a mental health professional, get coaching, have a relationship with your family and your spouse that's different.
Right.
The problem and what leads us to identify make our identity and the business one and the same is that we measure results. We tie ourselves to those results.
Right.
We think by our influence and even sometimes our perception of control, which is totally a perception, we think that we're the reason for all of this to either be successful or to fail. And so we tie ourselves to that. And you've got to create things that allow you to create space, even for a little bit, to be able to separate yourself from that.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, like a struggling quarter doesn't make you a failure as a human being.
Correct.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, and I think to your point, it's this idea. So if your entire identity is tied to your business, then every setback, because like Jim Rohn said, there's seasons.
Correct.
Then every setback is personal.
Correct.
It's like, why did this happen to me? Why did this happen? Why did I not get this deal? Why everything becomes personal?
Right.
And it's easy to say out loud.
It's easy to
but it's work to actually put it into practical application and to see it that way.
100%.
And again, it's not about maturity, it's about perspective.
Correct.
My perspective changed in so many different ways. When someone, I got this from Grant Cardone, it's like, people who are hating, right? No one hates down.
No.
Right? People who are successful don't hate on other people. Like no one hates down. People always hate up.
Right.
But it's the talking point was always like, hey, what did you give up on?
Right.
That you got to take time to knock what I'm doing.
Right.
What dream left in the closet?
Right.
Yeah. What did you give up on that you gotta? And I have a buddy who he lives his whole life on social media, and people who troll him, he reposts who they are, and he talks about it. And just the vitriol, the nasty things people have to say, like you don't even know this guy, like what, and you're just hating.
Right.
You're hating on his Lambo.
Right.
You're hating on his you're hating on his company, his tech company.
Right.
You're hating.
Right.
And that's the only thing it can be.
Right.
And there are people out there that, that do that. So the fact of the matter is, entrepreneurship builds resilience, right? It having leadership is developing character. Owners are creating opportunities for others,
right? As
entrepreneurs out there. And loneliness also can create wisdom. almost to the point that you're making, just in those walks. Right. You're strategizing. You're coming up with ideas. You're coming up with those things. So I think, Lon, there's a difference also to consider. There's a difference between being alone and being isolated.
Woo.
When the church say amen. I knew you were waiting for that one.
Perfect. Yeah.
And listen, I think as we wrap up on this conversation, what you're doing, how you represent yourself, how you show up, what your authority stack is out there, in terms of your business, in terms of having customers see you demonstrate that. I don't want to leave today without talking about the Obvious Choice interview and what we're doing with that and how we're helping people in that area.
Cory, and what you're talking about and what we're talking about today is the story that we live. And the Obvious Choice interview is an opportunity to tell the story that we live so that people can understand you better and connect with you. So right now, people are deciding if they trust you before they ever reach out. And if you don't look like the authority, you don't even get the opportunity.
Yep.
And that's why we created the Obvious Choice interview. And it's an opportunity to tell your story. It's a professionally produced TV-style interview that showcases your expertise, your story, and how you help your clients based on what you've learned, so that when your prospects find you, you're not just another option. You are the obvious choice. You can use it on your website, social media, in your sales process, anywhere trust matters. If you want to see what it looks like and how it works, just head over to obviouschoiceinterview.com.
That's right.
There you go.
So I think we're going to leave it there. Folks, I think obviously one of the best things that you can do, as a business owner, is to be intentional in many ways and intentionally build meaningful relationships also while you're building your business. Guard your circle, choose wisely, but guard your circle. Look at who you're picking. You may have to make a decision if you've got an unsupportive spouse at home. What's going to be more important to you? Your goals, the business, or that scenario.
Right.
And I think it's just something to get honest about when it comes to stuff like that, particularly, as my uncle says, he doesn't exactly know what's on the other side, but it's probably not as much fun as it is on this side.
Right.
So,
right.
And there's just some considerations in terms of where you want to go and what you want to have happen, and where are the barriers? Are the barriers employees? Are the barriers people around you? Negative people.
Right.
What did Les Brown say? Some people are so negative when they stand in a dark room, they start to develop.
I've never heard
you haven't heard him say that? Yeah.
Oh, that is so good.
So,
wow.
So yeah, I mean, if you're out there, if you've been feeling isolated, exhausted, overwhelmed, mentally worn down, understand that you aren't alone, and a lot of successful people carry things heavy, and sometimes the strongest thing that a leader can do is to acknowledge that they also need support.
Right. 100%.
So,
yeah.
All right, we're gonna leave it there, folks. LG.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Parting words.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Thanks for coming back. And next time, bring a friend.
That's right, folks. This has been another episode of the Grow Business Podcast. I'm Cory Mosley on behalf of myself, Lon Graham, LG007, and Willie H. We appreciate you being here, and we will see you next week. Willie H., take us out.
It's real.
It's real.
It's real.
Yeah,
man.
it's real.
It is real.
Yeah. And I think just people need to talk. We need to talk about it, It's one thing to be enveloped in strategies and tactics and in that mode. It's like those pillars, I put those pillars in a order for a reason,
right.
Because none of the other two operations, people, sales, none of the other two matter if number one, if the mindset piece is not there, So
well, I think what's really, really important, Cory, it's important to talk about it. What's important is to find people you can talk about it with.
Right.
Because, like you said, being in the auto industry, those are the people that get you. Find the people that get what you're dealing with,
sure.
your people.
That's right. Well, there it is. And we're out.
Yeah. Awesome. Good job. Well
Thank
done.
you. Same.
Yeah. All right. You're back.